In September 2025, the world's attention once again turned to China. First came the Shanghai Cooperation Organization Summit held in Tianjin, followed immediately by the highly anticipated 3 September military parade. Once again, Mr. Xi Jinping became the undisputed leading figure on the global political stage, arguably even more eye-catching than Donald Trump. This marked the 6th major military parade since Xi came to power, and the 3rd large-scale parade held in Tiananmen Square under his leadership. By contrast, each of his predecessors, from Deng Xiaoping to Hu Jintao, held only 1 or 2 parades during their entire terms in office. As the supreme ruler of the country, Xi's enthusiasm for this kind of centralized aesthetic is not merely a matter of personal preference. Behind it lies careful and calculated political reasoning. Today, we will examine every major military parade since China's reform and opening up, the power struggles over military authority behind them, and Xi Jinping's 3 dreams as reflected in his 6 parades. After the Cultural Revolution ended, the first major clash between Hua Guofeng and Deng Xiaoping stemmed from a military parade. In March 1978, the South Sea Fleet's Type 160 guided missile destroyer exploded and sank in Zhanjiang Harbour. It was the most serious accident in the history of the PLA Navy. At the time, 134 people were killed, 28 injured, and the ship was written off completely. The Type 160 destroyer was the largest surface warship independently developed by China at the time. The Navy commander was Xiao Jingguang, while Su Zhenhua served as the first political commissar. Su's main work focus was in Shanghai rather than within the Navy, meaning primary responsibility for the accident should have rested with Xiao Jingguang. However, because Su Zhenhua was seen as being too close to Hua Guofeng and insufficiently respectful toward his former superior Deng Xiaoping, he ultimately became the scapegoat and was subjected to severe criticism. Feeling deeply aggrieved, Su Zhenhua sought out Hua Guofeng, then chairman of the Central Military Commission, and spoke with him for 5 hours. Hua proposed that he would soon visit North Korea and, upon returning, could inspect the Navy in Dalian. Su Zhenhua immediately convened a meeting with several deputy naval commanders and proposed mobilizing 120 ships and 80 aircraft for the inspection. However, they failed to report this plan in a timely manner to the General Staff or the Central Military Commission. Luo Ruiqing, then Secretary General of the CMC, promptly informed Deng Xiaoping. Deng and Luo acted immediately. Under their firm pressure, Hua Guofeng, who was unfamiliar with military operations, had no choice but to cancel the parade. Throughout his entire tenure, Hua Guofeng never succeeded in holding a single military parade. Hua's foundation within the military had always been weak, and he paid little attention to military affairs. As he later recalled himself, "After smashing the Gang of Four, I served as chairman of the Military Commission, but I knew very little about the troops. I was too busy and had no time to visit the military units." He relied entirely on Marshal Ye Jianying to maintain contact with the armed forces and had little interaction even with Marshal Xu Xiangqian, his fellow townsman who had always been favourably disposed toward him. Step by step, Hua lost initiative within the military, one of the key reasons for his eventual removal from power. The year 1984 marked Deng Xiaoping's political high point. By then, he had spent 7 years manoeuvring to secure ultimate authority, with control of the military as the core battleground. Deng resumed his post as vice chairman of the Military Commission and chief of the General Staff, effectively becoming the third in command of the armed forces. As Ye Jianying was already advanced in age and lacking energy, Deng effectively controlled the day-to-day operations of the military. Deng proposed appointing the surviving marshals Liu Bocheng, Ni Rongzhen, and Xu Shangqian as vice chairman of the Military Commission. Given their prestige, Hua Guofeng had no choice but to agree. Due to Deng's deep ties with these marshals, they naturally became his allies. As a result, in the 6-member CMC Presidium, Deng effectively controlled 4 votes. Deng also selected Luo Ruiqing as Secretary General of the CMC to oversee its daily work. After Luo unexpectedly died while receiving medical treatment in West Germany, Ye Jianying seized the opportunity to recommend his trusted aide Geng Biao for the post. Deng was forced to accept, but he counterbalanced Geng by appointing Wei Guoqing and Yang Yong as Deputy Secretaries General. Fully aware of his constrained position, Deng avoided making decisions and instead submitted matters upward. Deng then established a CMC executive meeting dominated by his own confidants, effectively sidelining Deng. In 1981, Deng's ally Yang Shangkun became Secretary General and formally took control of the Commission's daily operations. From 1983 onward, Deng formed a management structure centered on Yang Shangkun as Secretary General, with Yu Chuli, Yang Dezi, Zhang Aiping, and Hong Xuezhi representing 4 major power blocks as Deputy Secretaries General. On the other hand, Deng Xiaoping planned 2 major events. The first was the well-known war against Vietnam, which both served as a pledge of allegiance to the United States and helped him secure control of the military. I will not dwell on that here. The second was the North China large-scale exercise held in Zhangjiakou in 1981. This was the largest realistic combat exercise since the founding of the PRC, and also a major initiative Deng Xiaoping seized upon after becoming chairman of the Central Military Commission. After the exercise ended, a parade was held immediately afterwards, and the young Xi Jinping also took part in this exercise. At the 12th Party Congress in 1982, Deng Xiaoping defeated the conservative forces led by He Guofeng at every level within the party centre. Next, he built a relatively relaxed international environment for China. In 1984, Chinese Premier Zhao Ziyang and US President Ronald Reagan conducted mutual visits, and Sino-US relations entered their first honeymoon period in history. Sino-Japanese relations also entered a new stage. In 1984, 3,000 Japanese youths visited China at the invitation of Hu Yaobang, and Japan subsequently invited 3,000 Chinese youths to visit Japan over a 10-year period. In the middle of that same year, Prime Minister Yasuhiro Nakasone visited China and brought with him a second tranche of Japanese yen loans worth 470 billion yuan. China and Britain continued negotiations over the Hong Kong issue, and in 1984 achieved the signing of the Sino-British Joint Declaration. By the end of that year, Sino-Soviet relations also emerged from their lowest point. With Gorbachev coming to power, relations between the two countries gradually moved in a positive direction. In China's surrounding region, only Vietnam acted as a troublemaker generating friction, but it did not constitute a major threat. The parade commander for the 1984 parade was Deng Xiaoping's trusted aide, Qin Jiwei, commander of the Beijing military region. The weapons and equipment reviewed were all domestically produced modernized armaments. The strategic missile force made its first appearance to the world, and a female soldiers formation also appeared for the first time. At this parade, Deng Xiaoping for the first time called out the slogan, "Hello comrades, comrades, you've worked hard." In the marching procession, a banner reading "Hello Xiaoping" appeared for the first time, carrying an air of equality and pulling the supreme leader down from the pedestal. The significance of the 1984 parade did not lie in advertising China's military strength to the world. Rather, it was a declaration of Deng Xiaoping's reform resolve through the medium of a parade. He was not brandishing a sword at the outside world. Instead, his blade was pointed at the many ills urgently in need of reform. The targets of this parade were the conservatives who opposed reform and those who denounced reform as heresy. This parade also became the only major parade of the 1982. After this parade, he soon launched an unprecedented large-scale demobilization, merged several military regions, and began a development strategy that prioritized the economy. It can be said that this parade may have been the most historically significant parade in the CCP's history. Deng Xiaoping's son, Deng Pufeng, once said, "My father fought wars for decades, but there was one thing about him any film that depicts the cruelty of war, he simply would not watch." Although Jiang Zemin assumed the position of chairman of the Central Military Commission in 1989, for the following 3 years, the daily operations of the commission remained firmly in the hands of the Yang brothers, Yang Shangkun and Yang Baibing. It was only through the manoeuvring of Zheng Qinghong that Jiang successfully exploited Deng Pufeng to drive a wedge between Deng Xiaoping and the Yang brothers. Even so, Deng Xiaoping still did not fully trust Jiang Zemin. He promptly arranged for Liu Huaqing and Zhang Zhen to serve as vice chairman of the military commission and appointed his personal secretary Wang Ruilin as deputy director of the general political department, placing him in charge of personnel matters across the entire military. Although Jiang Zemin had never personally worked within the armed forces, he was far from having no foundation there. His adoptive father had been a close wartime comrade of Jiang Yiping, which earned Jiang Zhang's full support. In addition, Jiang had built some personal connections with the Nanjing military region during his time working in Shanghai. More importantly, Jiang Zemin's political style was relatively soft. He relied on a policy of co-optation and gradually turned Deng's people into his own allies. For example, he promoted Wang Ruilin, then deputy director of the general political department, to membership of the Central Military Commission, and elevated Yang Dezhong, director of the Central Guard Bureau, to the rank of full general. By the time after Deng Xiaoping's death in 1998, Jiang Zemin had become the undisputed dominant figure within the military commission. Jiang Zemin had never held a gun in his life, nor did he possess the battlefield credentials of the old marshals. Deep down, he was never entirely confident that the military would obey him unconditionally at a critical moment. After Deng's death, Jiang was eager to seize an opportunity to establish absolute authority within the armed forces. However, in peacetime, large-scale troop mobilization requires a legitimate pretext. That opportunity arrived in 1998 when the Yangtze River experienced its worst flooding in a century. During the flood fighting campaign, a total of 7 million troop deployments were mobilized, along with more than 5 million militia and reserve personnel. The total number of personnel involved exceeded the combined troop strength of the three great campaigns of the Chinese Civil War. During the flood response, Jiang Zemin even conducted command exchange drills, swapping the commanders of the Guangzhou and Nanjing military regions. This had little to do with flood relief. Through this mobilization, Jiang truly gained control of the military and completed the generational transfer of power. Another major event occurred in 1998. In July, Jiang announced that the PLA and the armed police must thoroughly clean up all commercial enterprises run by their affiliated units. Fu Kuanyu, then chief of the general staff, called on every unit and every officer to unconditionally implement Chairman Jiang's new directive. This campaign to ban the military from business dealings effectively boosted Jiang Zemin's prestige and authority within the armed forces. It functioned as a large-scale obedience drill. In 1999, the massive Yuanhua smuggling scandal in Xiamen broke out. Liu Huaqing's daughter was deeply implicated, giving Jiang an opportunity to weaken Liu's influence within the military. At the same time, by punishing figures associated with the Ji Pengfei faction, Jiang helped Xiong Guangkai tighten control over the intelligence department of the general staff. The year before, Jiang had successfully forced Ye Xuanong of the General Political Department's liaison department into retirement, thereby securing control over yet another military intelligence apparatus. In May 1999, NATO forces bombed the Chinese embassy in Yugoslavia, killing 3 Chinese personnel and injuring dozens more. The incident ignited intense nationalist sentiment within China and triggered the largest student protests since 1989. Of course, the protests were directed not at the Communist Party, but at the United States. Against this backdrop, on 1 October 1999, China celebrated the 50th anniversary of the founding of the PRC. A grand military parade was held in Tiananmen Square, later affectionately referred to as the Parade of the Century. This parade functioned as Jiang Zemin's coronation as supreme leader and as a show of defiance toward the United States. It stirred strong patriotic fervour among the public. At the ceremony, Jiang's trusted aide, Li Xinliang, commander of the Beijing military region, served as parade commander. New service branches such as Army Aviation and the Marine Corps made their first appearances. New naval shipborne weapons and aerial refueling aircraft were unveiled to the world for the first time, demonstrating the PLA's efforts to transition from mechanisation to information-based warfare. Hu Jintao faced an even more difficult situation upon taking office than Jiang had. When Jiang assumed power, Deng Xiaoping was already elderly and genuinely willing to pass authority to the next generation, albeit with concerns over whether his line would be upheld. By contrast, when Hu came to power, Jiang was still very much alive and deeply reluctant to relinquish control. It was not until 2004 that Jiang handed the chairmanship of the military commission to Hu Jintao, and not until after 2007 that Jiang truly loosened his grip. At that point, Jiang's longtime secretary, Jia Ting'an, was transferred from director of the CMC General Office to deputy director of the General Political Department, vacating this central nerve hub. Hu Jintao had little personal connection with the military. Among the 7 military regions, the only commander he particularly trusted was Liu Zhenwu of the Guangzhou military region. The most critical personnel appointments concerned the Beijing garrison and the Beijing military region, responsible for the defense of the capital. In 2007, Li Xiaojun, commander of the 38th Army, abruptly replaced Chu Jingkai as commander of the Beijing garrison. At the same time, Fang Fenghe, chief of staff of the Guangzhou military region, was transferred to become commander of the Beijing military region, while command of the 38th Army was handed to Wang Yixing from the Chengdu military region. Within the military commission structure, the General Staff Department was responsible for executing operational command in combat missions. The position of Chief of the General Staff had always been the focal point of factional competition. As Jiang's protege Chen Bingde occupied this crucial post, Hu could only appoint his trusted figures, Zhang Qingsheng and Cai Yingting, as deputy chiefs. Hu Jintao also sought to promote a joint chief system to reform the PLA's traditional command structure and compete for operational command authority. However, due to various complexities, this effort achieved little substantive progress. After failing to gain control of the general staff, Hu turned his attention to other branches. Following joint military exercises with foreign forces in 2007, he rapidly promoted Xu Qilang within the Air Force, elevating him to Air Force commander and CMC member, and later vice chairman of the CMC, the first time an Air Force officer had reached such heights. In the Navy, Hu launched a limited anti-corruption campaign. Former Deputy Navy Commander Wang Shuai was sentenced to life imprisonment, becoming one of the highest-ranking officers prosecuted since the founding of the PRC. In 2006, when Hu Jintao inspected the North Sea Fleet, 2 warships suffered serious accidents. For a time, this was even rumoured externally as an attempted naval assassination of Hu Jintao. Hu used this opportunity to remove Zhang Dingfa, the naval commander associated with Jiang Zemin's faction, and replaced him with the younger Wu Shengli. In April 2009, a naval parade commemorating the 60th anniversary of the PLA Navy was held in the Yellow Sea near Qingdao. This was China's first ever multi-nation naval review and the largest naval parade in the history of the Chinese Navy up to that point. At the same time, Hu Jintao also adopted Jiang Zemin's old method, using military ranks to win over senior officers. When Hu first took over as CMC chairman in 2004, he did not have the authority to confer the ranks of lieutenant general or full general. He only had the authority to confer the rank of Major General. This situation began to change after 2007. In July 2008, Hu Jintao awarded Xu Fenlin the rank of Lieutenant General. In July 2009, Hu awarded the rank of Lieutenant General to 4 people: Zhao Zongqi, Zhang Shibo, Wang Jiaochang, and Cai Yingting. Of course, alongside the carrot, there was also the stick. In 2007, Hu signed a newly revised set of PLA audit regulations, strengthening audits of officers at all levels. However, Hu Jintao's political manoeuvring was not as skillful as Jiang Zemin's. He himself was not particularly enthusiastic about power struggles, and his main political strategist, Ling Jihua, was not very familiar with military personnel arrangements. Moreover, Hu's style was relatively mild. Unless absolutely forced into it, he would not push matters to a do-or-die breaking point. He seriously lacked both the fighting spirit and the methods required for internal political combat. Hu also wasted many opportunities. During the 2008 Wenchuan earthquake relief operations, there was an incident of poor military command and coordination. Chen Bingde, the chief of the general staff at the time, later published an article in the party media disclosing that in the 3 days after the quake, all military actions had to be approved by CMC leader Jiang Zemin. CMC Vice Chairman Guo Boxiong also refused to follow the dispatching authority of the overall earthquake relief commander, Premier Wen Jiabao. Instead, he separately set up a military earthquake relief command headquarters. Hu Jintao did not seize this opportunity to punish the responsible military leaders or install his own people. On 5 July 2009, severe unrest broke out in Urumqi, Xinjiang. Hu Jintao, who was visiting Italy at the time, returned to China early. The then party secretary of Xinjiang, Wang Lequan, was exposed as having made serious political errors and being implicated in corruption. Hu did not hold him accountable. He missed a key opportunity to compete for control of the People's Armed Police. Instead, the influence of Zhou Yongkang associated with Jiang's faction expanded rapidly, and Zhou gained a degree of authority over the deployment of the PAP. China in 2009 stood at a critical juncture. Before that year, the country had just experienced the Wenchuan earthquake, severe snowstorms in the south, and unrest in Tibet, and had also encountered the global financial crisis, truly a string of misfortunes. On the other hand, China had also just hosted the Olympic Games and was rapidly transforming into the world's factory. For Hu Jintao, he was still in the midst of an intense struggle for power and urgently needed a major event to declare his status and strength, helping him win over those fence-sitting centrists. Against this backdrop, the 2009 military parade from the outset carried the goal of boosting morale among the public emerging from disaster, while also serving as a demonstration of Hu Jintao's domestic authority. The parade commander in 2009 was Fang Fenghui, newly appointed commander of the Beijing military region. This parade was the most frugal in the history of the Communist Party's parades, and also the most original. For the first time, it displayed a full special forces formation. All weapons and equipment on display were made in China, and more than 90% were new faces on the National Day parade grounds. From taking office in 2012 to the present, Xi Jinping has held 5 major parades. With this year's 3 September parade included, the total comes to 6. Each of these 6 parades took place under different circumstances and served different purposes, and behind each lay meticulous calculation and planning. In 2015, Xi Jinping had secured an initial victory within the party through the anti-corruption storm and had brought down top CMC figures such as Xu Kaihu and Guo Boxiong. Under his plan, an unprecedented round of military reforms was about to enter the stage of history. He urgently needed a display of strength to show both internal and external opponents within the party his power and to complete the final sprint toward becoming the one. By convention, he would have needed to wait until the 2019 anniversary celebrations to gain the opportunity for a parade, but he clearly could not wait that long. So, following Deng Xiaoping's approach, he created a major parade under the banner of commemorating the 70th anniversary of victory in the War of Resistance. This parade was aimed primarily at domestic opposition forces and fence-sitters within China. It was meant to intimidate those who opposed him and win over the core forces who were still watching and waiting. It had little to do with resisting Japan. Therefore, this parade was very similar to Hu Jintao's 2009 parade, an effort by Xi Jinping to reach the top. On 30 July 2017, ahead of the 90th anniversary of the founding of the PLA, Xi Jinping held his second military parade at the Zhurihei Tactical Training Base. This was the first parade themed around Army Day, and also the first time Xi reviewed troops on an active field training ground rather than in a ceremonial urban setting. By this point, Xi had already been formally recognized as the new core leader of the Communist Party, and his position as the sole undisputed commander-in-chief within the military had also been confirmed. This parade deliberately echoed Deng Xiaoping's North China military exercises decades earlier. Back then, the young Xi Jinping had participated in those drills as an ordinary soldier, an experience that left a lasting impression on him. Now, as Supreme Commander, he staged a similar exercise himself. Naturally, this parade also served as an inspection of the results of military reform. It emphasized real combat training, and notably, Xi was the only member of the Politburo Standing Committee present. There were no other guests. This exercise sent a clear signal to other factions within the party. Xi Jinping had firmly seized control of the military. Not long after this exercise, the 19th Party Congress was convened. By then, no internal force remained capable of restraining this leader. In April 2018, a major naval parade was held in waters near Sanya in the South China Sea. During this exercise, China publicly revealed its latest generation of strategic nuclear submarines and attack submarines for the first time. This was the first grand military parade held by the CCP in the South China Sea, and the largest naval parade since the founding of the PRC. Its intended audience were neighbouring countries with territorial disputes with China, such as Vietnam and the Philippines. The message was clear. The CCP had completed preparations to defend its claims in the South China Sea, and the strategic situation had fundamentally changed. Further provocations would no longer be tolerated. Prior to this parade, Xi Jinping had already brought down Sun Zhengkai, one of the successor candidates arranged by previous leaders, and had amended the constitution to abolish presidential term limits, removing the institutional restraints on his continued rule. At this parade, Hu Chunhua, the successor candidate favoured by Hu Jintao, was allowed to accompany Xi throughout the event. Having witnessed Sun Zhengkai's downfall, Hu Chunhua's state of mind was self-evident. However, because Hu Jintao's political influence still lingered, and Hu Chunhua had no corruption scandals or overt political ambition, Xi ultimately reached a political conclusion about him. An honest man, but lacking ability, and not one of us. Thus, by the end of that exercise, Hu Chunhua's political fate had effectively been sealed. Xi kept him on for another 5 years in the most demanding and exhausting role of vice premier. As Hu Jintao's health declined, Hu Chunhua was gradually sidelined, effectively ending his political career. In April 2019, a naval parade marking the 70th anniversary of the PLA Navy was held off the coast of Qingdao. An international fleet review was conducted alongside it, featuring 32 warships and 39 aircraft, including China's first aircraft carrier, the Liaoning. Naval vessels from 61 countries also participated in the international review. This naval parade was smaller in scale than the South China Sea Parade and resembled more an event orchestrated by naval leaders to please Xi Jinping and demonstrate their loyalty. Inviting foreign naval vessels to such celebrations is a long-standing naval tradition intended to enhance exchanges and cooperation between navies. The most unexpected beneficiary of this parade, however, was Wang Qingshen, then party secretary of Qingdao. During the parade, Wang gained an opportunity for close interaction with Xi Jinping. Xi personally shared his expectations for Qingdao and encouraged Wang to make bold progress. This cadre, who previously had no direct connection with Xi, was subsequently noticed by the organisation department. 2 years later, he skipped the position of Provincial Deputy Party Secretary and was directly promoted to Governor of Anhui Province. On 1 October 2019, the 70th anniversary National Day military parade was held in Tiananmen Square. This was the largest parade since Xi came to power, showcasing 7 decades of achievements in defence industry and military construction. It also marked the greatest number of new weapon systems making their first public appearance in the history of CCP parades. In essence, this parade functioned as Xi Jinping's formal coronation as supreme leader. Within 7 years in office, Xi had defeated all opposing forces within the military, reshaped the leadership and management structure of the armed forces, rebuilt the Joint Operations Command System, and constructed a dense system of supervision and auditing over all officers. In effect, he had reconstructed the entire military architecture. If Mao Zedong can be called the father of the CCP's army, then Xi Jinping can justifiably be described as the mother of the contemporary Chinese military. Under Mao, the military still contained many factions, and Mao often had to rely on different individuals at different times to control the armed forces. Xi, by contrast, eliminated most factions outright, even abolishing unit designations, turning them into tools stripped of institutional memory. 继续，下面是最后一部分，依然严格遵循你的要求。澳大利亚英文 Australian English 全文正式翻译，不删节，不弱化，不改写立场。保持纪录片旁白语语，完成全文收尾。第七部分2019之后的压力2025就三月并与三个梦想 English, Australian English. Despite having consolidated immense power, China's overall situation at that time was far from stable. Around that year, Donald Trump launched a protracted trade war against China. Hong Kong erupted into million-strong protests against the extradition bill. The so-called re-education camps in Xinjiang attracted intense international scrutiny. At the same time, economic growth was slowing. Xi Jinping faced enormous pressure both inside and outside the party. That military parade was a show of force directed at domestic and international opposition alike, a demonstration of his own strength and iron will. It was precisely the confidence he drew from that parade that enabled him to persevere through the trade war and later through the battle against the pandemic. Historically, the Chinese Communist Party never had a tradition of holding military parades in years commemorating victory in the war of resistance against Japan, because the party's top leadership has always been fully aware that the victory in that war had little to do with the CCP. Holding such a parade amounts to seizing credit that properly belongs to the nationalist government, an act bordering on shamelessness. The 2015 parade was purely a pretext Xi Jinping devised to consolidate his power, a temporary and opportunistic maneuver. This raises the question, why hold yet another parade in 2025 to commemorate victory in the war of resistance? The most fundamental reason lies in Xi Jinping's three dreams: the dream of becoming a world leader, the dream of unification, and the dream of building a powerful military. Compared with 6 years ago, the single greatest change in the world has been the outbreak of the Russia-Ukraine war. Around this war, the world has once again split into two sharply opposed camps. On one side, Europe and the United States. On the other, China, Russia, and their aligned partners. Originally, Russia was the undisputed leader of the latter camp. However, after a prolonged and exhausting war, Russia has fallen from being the world's second largest military power to something closer to an enlarged version of Iran, surviving only through China's covert financial lifelines and even requiring assistance from North Korea. As a result, China has unquestionably become the leader of this camp. This can be clearly seen from the list of foreign dignitaries attending the parade ceremony. Virtually no leaders from major Western countries were present. Those who did attend were leaders of countries dependent on China, resembling nothing so much as a gathering of beggars. This parade can therefore be understood as Xi Jinping's coronation as the leader of this global beggars' alliance. The dream of unification is even more explicit. At present, China's conflicts with Japan and the Philippines in the East and South China Seas are not particularly intense, and China already holds the upper hand. There is no need to stage such a massive parade merely to warn them. Xi Jinping's deepest obsession is resolving the Taiwan issue during his time in power, fulfilling his nationalist dream, and thereby securing a place in history as a once-in-a-millennium ruler. Since Lai Ching-te came to office, repeated provocations on sensitive issues have relentlessly tested Xi's nerves, causing him to abandon any remaining hope for peaceful unification. At present, the PLA's foremost strategic task is preparing for a Taiwan Strait war. The entire military is conducting realistic combat exercises and logistical preparations. Nearly all defence factories across the country are operating at full capacity. Strategic reserves of all kinds are being built up continuously. If it were not for limitations in force projection capability, action would likely have already been taken. This Grand Parade also serves as a warning to Taiwan, as well as to the United States and Japan, which might intervene in a cross-strait conflict. The message is simple. I am already strong and growing stronger by the day. You would do well to behave yourselves, otherwise I may strike at any moment. This parade also serves Xi Jinping's dream of building a powerful military. From the start of military reforms in 2015 to the present, 10 years have passed. Over these 10 years, assuming an average annual military budget of 1.5 trillion yuan, total investment has reached well over 10 trillion yuan. Now is the time to assess the results of those reforms. This includes showcasing advanced military equipment, unveiling new service branches, and demonstrating the military's level of obedience. In such large-scale parades, the soldiers' perfectly synchronized marching creates a sense of order and power. When combined with a narrative of national rejuvenation and national rise, it naturally generates a sense of national pride and leader worship among vast numbers of people who lack independent thinking. They do not associate the cost of the parade with the pensions they are forced to pay into. They do not connect the armed soldiers on display with armed police suppressing civilians in incidents like Jiayu. They do not distinguish between the party and the state, nor between loving the party and loving the country. At a time of economic slowdown and weakening traditional sources of regime legitimacy, if a single parade can generate such an increase in popular support, why wouldn't it be worth doing? What appears to be a simple personal obsession is in fact the result of multiple layers of shrewd calculation. Our so-called great leader has never been as simple as he appears. While his understanding of economic development may be at the level of a primary school student, when it comes to techniques of mass manipulation and authoritarian control, he has already far surpassed the level of university professors. That concludes today's discussion. I hope everyone will follow the channel, like and comment. Doing so helps YouTube expand the video's reach and allows more viewers to learn the truth about China. Thank you for your support.